Okay. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us. We are about to start this first session. First of all, I'd like to ask the participants if you can mute yourself and stop sharing your videos, because we want to be able to have all the capacity of the channels for the people presenting today. So I'm going to do the same. Stop my video, and now I'm going to start sharing. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the first webinar from a series of webinars we've organized for talking about energy transition in the North Sea. So today we are going to be talking about the first part of these webinars. It's going to be carbon capture and storage, and the role of this carbon capture and storage technology in the energy transition. So this webinar has been organized from the EAGE Decarbonization and Energy Transition Committee as part of all our activities for the special community in energy transition. And we had the collaboration from different local chapters, local chapter London, local chapter Aberdeen, and also local chapter Oslo. And we also had the collaboration from the Oslo Society for Exploration Geophysicists. So before we start, just allow me to give you a brief introduction about the EAGE special interest community in decarbonization and energy transition. For those who don't know us yet, our community activities are focused in promoting knowledge and develop skills among geosciences and engineers working in the energy transition, or for who are looking for starting their career in the energy transition and decarbonization. Our aim is to bring together both professionals from industry and academia for sharing knowledge, ideas, and discussing as well different technologies involved in the energy transition. So, sorry, for the people, if you are interested, the people that are interested in knowing more about us and our activities, please join us in LinkedIn. So you can find us at the EAGE, Decarbonization and Energy Transition. And in our LinkedIn group, you're going to find all the information about the event and activities that we are organizing. Here, I just wanted to show you a sample of the activities we've been organizing in the past, where we also put the focus in identifying new opportunities for professionals from the oil and gas industry and discussing how their skills are transferable to the energy transition and decarbonization of the energy system. And for the future, we are still organizing a lot of activities, and I wanted to share with you the DET 2020. This is the first EAGE Geoscience and Engineering in Energy Transition Conference. And initially, that conference was going to be held in Strasbourg in France, but due to the current situation, with the sanitary emergency, the organizers decided to make it all online. So early registration is now open. You can visit the event in the webpage at jet2020.org, and you can do your early registration until before the 25th of October. And then I wanted to show you as well another event we're going to be holding on November the 9th. And it's going to be the Fractured Geothermal Reservoir online seminar. So if you are interested in any of these activities or all the activities, you will find all the information in our LinkedIn group. And now we can start with the presentations for today. So the first presentation, it's going to be given by Mike Carpenter, and in collaboration with Audun Rosgaard. At the end, here with us. Hi. Yeah, okay. So Mike, he's a geophysicist and he's been working in the CCS since 2007. He's passionate about creating low carbon economy in line with the Paris Agreement goals to create synergies between the public and private sector. So, hello, Mike.
Hi, Carlo.
Hi, thank you very much for joining us today. I see you are already sharing your screen. That's great. Okay, so if you want, you can start with the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. This energy transition group in EAGE looks really interesting. It's kind of new for me, and I'm going to register for all your events immediately.
Thank you.
It's really what we need to be talking about. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about what's happening in Norway at the moment. Our project now has a name. The Prime Minister gave it a name last week. It's called Longship or Longship in Norwegian. And it's all about setting sail and conquering new territory within energy transition. So kind of a Viking metaphor. Okay, see how I advance my slides. Here we go. So this was the press release from the government last week. Norway to build the Longship CCS project, and I'm going to explain what that is in my talk and some of the engineering, some of the geology, some of the costs, and open up for questions at the end. When should I aim to be finished with my presentation, Carla?
Sorry?
How long have I got?
How long?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have 15 minutes for your
15?
presentation. And then,
Okay.
sorry, I didn't say, but we are going to have all the questions at the end of the session. In the
Yeah.
discussion at the very end, we'll have 30 minutes of discussion with all the questions. So,
Okay.
yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Thank
Great.
you.
Okay, so save your questions for later on. But this is not yet a done deal, despite the government's proposal to fund this. This is a headline in Norwegian. I couldn't find one in English yet, but this is one of the conservative parties in Norway opposing the project. And there'll be a discussion in Parliament this autumn with some horse trading, but we hope that Parliament will approve the government's proposal by the end of the year. That's the current status. I work in GasNova. We are a technical agency for CCS that is organized below the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy in Norway. We help manage the test center at Mongstad on the west coast, which is Capture Test Center. We administer a sizable research fund called Climate, and we have been responsible for coordinating and funding the feasibility, the feasibility and the FEED studies for this project that I'm presenting. So let's start at a European level and talk about energy transition. This is a map that has been made by the Northern Lights Partnership, which is Shell, Total and Equinor, who are heavily involved in this project. And they see this project as a stepping stone to a future represented by this map, where they will be moving CO2 around Europe, bringing it to Norway and storing it offshore in the Norwegian continental shelf, thereby helping heavy industry in Northern Europe to decarbonize, hence the energy transition. The sources of CO2 that that Northern Lights could be collecting from, they could be cement factories, could be waste to energy plants, could be hydrogen production facilities, that sort of thing. And given the European Union's ever-increasing ambition with their climate goals for 2030 and 2050, they think there will be a commercial market for transporting CO2 away for storage. If we now zoom into Norway and look at an overview of the current project, you can see a white dashed arrowed line going from the east coast of Norway to the west coast. There are two potential sources of CO2 in this project. One is the Norcem cement factory at Brevik, which has a green tick next to it. And one is the Fortum Oslo Varme energy recovery plant, which has a yellow question mark next to it. That is a result of the government's current proposal, which is to fund 80% of the Norcem plant, where Heidelberg Group, who own Norcem, would fund the remaining approximately 20%. Fortum Oslo Varme, higher cost, which I'll show you later, but the Norwegian government has said that they will fund that if Fortum Oslo Varme can secure additional funding from Europe. So hence the question mark. So that's the capture side of the CCS value chain, and then Northern Lights partnership come in, Equinor, Shell, Total, with 2 to 3 new build specialist CO2 tanker ships to take the CO2 from those locations around the southern tip of Norway and up to the west coast, where they will build a receiving terminal at a greenfield site, and then pump the CO2 offshore through a pipeline to a subsea well. The transport distance for the ships is about 700 kilometers, and the volumes are too small at this stage to justify a dedicated pipeline, hence the ships. CO2 will be in liquid phase the whole way at 15 bar and minus 26 degrees C. That is until it gets pumped offshore, where the pressure increases and the temperature goes up. So this is an artist's impression of what the receiving terminal on the west coast will look like. It's on an island. This view is looking east, so it's the mainland of Norway that you can see in the distance across the sound here. This receiving terminal is on the eastern side of a long, thin island that runs north-south parallel with the coastline. So this is showing a CO2 tanker ship coming in, mooring up at the pier which will be built, and then it pumps its CO2 ashore. The holding tanks, the vertical holding tanks there, there's enough volume in those to hold one shipload of CO2, and then from there there's an export pump and a pipeline going offshore. This illustration, along with many other very good illustrations, can be found in the Northern Lights Impact Assessment Report, which is in English and publicly available on their website. Here's another map, zooming in a little bit more on the west coast. You can see the receiving terminal there, and then a CO2 export pipeline in yellow. It runs north-northwest and then turns southwest to the subsea well located at the Red Star. And then there's a black line going from the Red Star to the Oseberg platform. That is the well control umbilical with hydraulics and data. So the well will be operated from the Oseberg platform, and the export pump will be operated from the receiving terminal. And this is all happening a little bit south of the Troll A platform, which is illustrated to the north there. Here's another map showing the Troll field in red, and the license area which Northern Lights now have for storing CO2, shown with a blue outline. And this is also to illustrate that we have implemented the CCS directive in Norway. There's a CO2 storage law, based on petroleum regulations, but adapted to take into consideration the EU directive. That came into place in 2014. You're probably aware of two other CO2 storage projects ongoing in Norway, the Sleipner and the Snøhvit fields. They were permitted under petroleum regulations. They are part of hydrocarbon development fields. So they weren't permitted under this regime. But it's interesting to note that the authorities have retrospectively permitted them after 2014, so that they are also formally in accordance with the new rules as well. So for CO2 storage, you go through a similar process as with oil and gas exploration. You get a screening permit to do a desk study. You get an exploration permit, drill wells, shoot seismic. And then you get an exploitation permit to exploit the pore volume in the subsurface. And Northern Lights were awarded that at the beginning of last year for the acreage shown in blue. And then when they're ready to inject in 2024, they need to get an injection permit from the Norwegian Environmental Agency. Now we're going to look in more detail at that acreage called Aurora in this map. So here's a bit of geology. There's a depth map there down to the top of the Johansen Formation, which is the primary storage unit. The blue colors go down to 3,300 meters, and the red colors within the Troll field there, they're at about 1,900 meters. And the outline that was in blue is now in purple in this map. North to south, that map is about 100 kilometers, and you've got about a 60-kilometer section of that from A to A prime, shown in the cross section here. You can see there's a general dip to the south at an angle of about little over 1 degree. And here you can see the geology. And you can see the Johansen Formation there. It's the yellow layer at the bottom. And our injection well, 3157, called the EOS well, is indicated. And the blue arrows show where the CO2 is planned to be injected. And Northern Lights expect a northwards up-dip migration of the CO2. And they've done a risk assessment looking at possible leakage pathways. They evaluate the risk to be low. I anticipate there'll be some questions around this. I guess I can show the slide again later if so. Here's the timeline. The feasibility study was in 2016. We've gone through concept studies, feed studies. Industry have funded some of that work. The government via Gassnova has funded most of the work. Where we are today is shown in red. The government proposes to launch the Longship project. There's a little bit more of the light blue colour left as Parliament discuss and make their decision by the end of the year. And then hopefully, all going according to plan, construction work starts in January next year, and we begin operating in 2024. This is a slide to explain something which is particular in Norway, where any major infrastructure project requiring large amounts of taxpayers' money goes through an obligatory quality assurance process organized by the Ministry of Finance. And just to say that our project has been through that process and got a green light in June of this year, which was a necessary requirement in order for the government to recommend the funding. Okay, I'm getting to the end of my slides. This is to show the cost, Capex and Opex. This is in millions of euros for the Capex. So you can see that the capture plants vary from 300 to 400 million euros to build. The two ships with the receiving terminal, the pipeline, the well, the umbilical, that whole transport and storage package comes in at 835 million euro. And then your Opex costs are between 4 and 5% of Capex for each part of the chain. Again, I expect questions, and I'll see if I can bring this slide up again later. If we look at the net present cost per ton stored, looks like this, assuming 25 years of operation, discount rate of 4%. If the project never does anything else except transport and store CO2 from these two sources in Norway, you're looking at a net present cost per ton of 120 euros, which is rather high. But the idea with this project is that Northern Lights can collect CO2 from multiple other sources around Europe and expand the receiving terminal, add additional wells, and increase the volumes of CO2 flowing through their system. And that brings the cost down quite substantially. And here we've done it in 2 steps. The initial receiving terminal has a throughput capacity of 1.5 million tons per year. So if they fill that up with additional third-party volumes, price comes to around 90 euros per ton. If they go beyond that, they can expand the receiving terminal. The pipeline that's being put in place is 12-inch, and that can have a throughput capacity of 5 million tons per year. You need some additional wells on the end of that to accept the volumes. But you can start to get down to below 30 euros per ton, which is beginning to approach today's quota price for CO2 in Europe. So you can see that there's a line of sight here to a commercial model where it becomes attractive for emitters of CO2 to pay Northern Lights to come and collect the CO2 and take it away instead of buying emission quota. So thank you very much, and look forward to your questions a bit later on.
Thank you very much, Mike, for this super interesting presentation. So just for let you know all, if you have questions, you can write it in the chat you have, and we'll go through all the questions at the end of the session. So now I'm gonna be, yeah, great, thank you. So our next speaker is going to be John from Professor John Gluyas from the University of Durham. Hello, John. Thank you very much for joining us. So Professor John Gluyas is Ørsted Icon Chair in Geoenergy, Carbon Capture and Storage in the Department of Earth Science at Durham University. And he's Executive Director in the Durham Energy Institute. And today he's going to be giving us a talk about CCS technology in the UK and its future. So good afternoon, John.
Paula, thank you very much indeed. And thank you to EAGE for inviting me to speak today. Rather like Mike, I've been involved with CCS quite some time. I think the first occasion was back in 2005, and then a move into Durham in 2009. You can see from my title and Carla's introduction that it became a major part of my life. In the next 20 minutes or so is a bit like Christmas Carol. I will go through UK CCS past very briefly, present, and then speculate a little bit on CCS future. It's had a very checkered career so far in the UK with a number of false starts, which I'm hoping to get the next slide up, which seems to have, there we go. This by no means tries to capture all the events which have occurred in CCS in the UK, but does, I hope, capture some of the major ones. And you'll see Norway stole the march on much of the rest of the world back in 1996, as Mike has said, with the Sleipner programme, and that's been operating continuously since then. But it was not until some 10 years later in the UK that the Carbon Capture and Storage Association was founded in 2006, a trade body, if you like. That was founded at a time when BP and the then Labour government were negotiating whether or not the Miller fields would be a suitable candidate for CO2 storage. In fact, it's a brilliant candidate for CO2 storage, since Miller itself, very close to Sleipner and rather like the Sleipner field, was very rich in CO2, and the pipeline from Miller back to shore at Peterhead, Scotland, was virtually empty by the mid-noughties. Unfortunately, no deal was agreed, and what is probably one of the best potential depleted storage sites, depleted field storage sites in the UK, went on to be abandoned. But shortly around about the same time, the government in the UK put together the first carbon capture and storage to develop consortia that were going to store CO2 in the surface beneath the North Sea, either within depleted oil and gas fields or possibly in undeveloped deep saline aquifers. That competition, I suppose before saying on how it ended, in 2009, probably one of the most comprehensive studies ever done globally on storage potential for
John,
CCS.
Sorry to interrupt, but we missed your presentation. I think stop sharing screen.
Oh, not intentionally. I do apologise.
Oh, it's fine. Thank you.
Try again.
Let's try again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Now we see again your presentation. If you can show.
I wonder what went on there. Let me know if it fails again, please.
Great. Don't worry. Thank you.
So, one of the most comprehensive studies of its kind, 2009, bringing a bunch of academics, Durham, Heriot-Watt, Edinburgh, and the BGS together with industry to create an inventory of the potential storage sites in the North Sea. That really set the bar, and subsequently after the Norwegians did a similar study, and I was involved with another large study in South Africa. However, it still didn't make the grade, as it were, in terms of the UK governmental programmes. As you can see there in red, was cancelled again. So we find ourselves in the middle of 2012 with the formation of the United Kingdom Carbon Capture and Storage Research Centre, which is still going strong and based now out of Sheffield, and a third attempt, a second cancellation followed shortly thereafter. What I'll do is just look at particularly that late stage where we got very close to storage before moving on to the current situation and looking at the future. So between 2013 and 2015, the CCS went from joy to despair. In 2013, the first ever dedicated CO2 storage well was drilled in the southern North Sea by National Grid Carbon, as the subsidiary was known at the time. That was tested by injecting seawater but within a hair's breadth of either this programme or the Scottish programme going ahead towards the end of 2015, two events followed one after another. First of all, the incoming government committed to CCS in the manifesto only a few months later, just before the Paris Accord, to cancel £1 billion of funding for CCS. And that left us somewhat in the doldrums for some time. But bringing things right up to date, the narrative has changed in the UK. The insertion, and it may seem a little trite, but the insertion of an extra letter in the acronym from CCS to CCUS occurred to become widespread towards the end of 2018 or 2019. And although there are very few uses for carbon dioxide that liberate energy rather than consume it, that allowed a narrative to change. And one of the particular components within that narrative was the aspiration of the emergence of a hydrogen economy. And that was mentioned by Mike earlier on. And I think this has made a significant change to the way in which the UK is moving forward. And that has subsequently resulted in a flurry of activity over the last few years. And we're now in the position where the government, through the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, has appointed a CCS audit team, of which I'm part. And there are a number of projects. If you look on the Carbon Capture and Storage Association website, there are 5 key cluster projects which are moving forward. Now, what I'll report in the next few slides is basically material from the websites of these 5 clusters. And we'll start with Nexus, as it's called. And that is an enormous programme with 40 partners based in Scotland. It includes the petroleum industry upstream and downstream, along with users and producers of CO2, the civil service, both national and local government, Quangos and academia. And they have a very clear programme, a very clear timeline, which will see first carbon storage going from St Fergus on the coast just north of Aberdeen out to the North Sea by 2024. That will be tied in with first hydrogen production. And I'm summarising, there's a great deal more on the website than we have here. By 2027, the plan is to tie in the central belt of Scotland, and that's the area between Edinburgh in the east and Glasgow in the west, and where virtually all of the heavy industry lies. And of course, the Scottish Government has made a commitment to become net zero by 2045. The storage sites, if you delve deep into some of the partnerships, and in particular Pale Blue Dot and the Acorn Initiative, will be in Goldeneye, the former gas field in the Outer Moray Firth. The map of potential sources is shown again on the Nexus website, and you can see them scattered through the central belt from Glasgow through to Edinburgh, and then along the east coast to Aberdeen and the aforementioned Peterhead Power Station. So that's the plan for Scotland. If we move to the English and Welsh initiatives, another fairly well-developed programme, as shown on their website, is HyNet, and of course that stands for Hydrogen Network. That's based in the northwest England, offshore North Wales and offshore Liverpool. There are 6 partners. They comprise both industry and academia, and currently they describe themselves as building evidence, with hydrogen supply construction to begin possibly as early as next year, and expect to be around net zero by 2040. They will be using a suite of sites in the East Irish Sea. The East Irish Sea is one of the lesser known petroleum provinces of the UK, and there are 2 areas, the Liverpool Bay sites, which are, as one might imagine, offshore Liverpool and Southport in northwest England, and then further north, offshore Blackpool, are the Morecambe Bay sites. The southern cluster of sites at Liverpool Bay, which has been selected, is likely to be Hamilton. Hamilton is a permeable gas field which was first produced in 1996. Back then, I had responsibility for it from between then and 2005, so I know it well. And then there is a series of other fields in that southern cluster which were either gas fields in the Hamilton, Hamilton East, Hamilton North, or oil and gas fields in Lennox, or oil field in Douglas. And further north than that, even bigger potential storage sites which are heavily depleted in the Morecambe area. One of those sites we know already, Morecambe North, carries about 7% CO2. So if in effect these sites are partially tested. Flipping from the northwest of England's east coast, Zero Carbon Humber has 3 partners, industrial partners, and it plans within the next decade to be the first carbon negative power station globally. And BECS stands for biomass with carbon capture and storage, in that the power station at Drax on the Humber imports wood pellets, which are of course biomass, and will see the carbon capture and storage attached to that. By the mid-2020s, there is also hydrogen planned for that same station. The site of storage is not named on the Zero Carbon Humber site, but we can infer from some of the narrative that it's likely to be in the southern North Sea, and I'll look at that in just a few minutes. Because using the same potential storage site is Net Zero Teesside. Teesside is one of 2 areas in the UK which have the highest CO2 footprint. It's linked to the petrochemical and cement and other industries which lie in that region, really the heart of industrial UK. And they plan to capture 10 million tonnes of CO2 per annum and become the first industrialised, decarbonised industrial cluster in the UK. It's rather interesting that this picks up on area in which I did plenty of work when I first arrived in Durham about 10 years ago on what then was known as the TLC project, or Teesside Low Carbon. So delivery is anticipated by 2030, some 10 years from now. Which I would infer is being targeted by both the Humber and Teesside clusters, is the one called Endurance within the southern North Sea. These 3 diagrams are from a paper which will come out in the new Geological Society Memoir 50 next month in early November of 2020. And it shows the position on the left chart there of the Endurance structure nestled amongst some of the now depleted oil fields, gas fields in the southern North Sea. In fact, the northern edge of Endurance just overlaps the Garrow field. Garrow is developed in the deep, or was developed in the deep Carboniferous, with a veneer of Permian sands above it. Endurance, in contrast, is in the much shallower cover, dome-like cover, which occurs within the highly porous and highly permeable Bunter sandstone, and you can see that in the cross-section below. A more detailed map is shown on the right-hand side. The structure was drilled initially many years ago for exploration purposes. It proved not to contain any gas within the structure, as many of the Bunter sand trap geometries do not in the southern North Sea, and was appraised in 2013. I mentioned National Grid Carbon drilled a well in 2013, the number 3 well, down on the flank of the structure. Were able to demonstrate that the reservoir quality was good for injection, and we did an injection test. That well, of course, then suffered from being subject to the real shutdown of these attempts at CCS in the UK in the tail end of 2013. but the structure is a good one, and undoubtedly, this, depending upon the saturation of CO2 that you put into this, it could take as much as 500 million tons or so. So it's a large structure, and it's one of many which have been mapped within the southern North Sea and if you like, the Bunter Triassic sandstones, which overlie the main gas provinces in the Permian and Carboniferous. The final one, really not been able to, this is again shown on the Carbon Capture and Storage Association website, and there's not a great deal of information there which is accessible to the general public, but they anticipate, given the CO2 within the South Wales corridor, that this would capture around about 6 million tons of CO2 from the power sector, and perhaps as much as 10 million tons per annum from the industrial sector. Along the south coast of Wales, from Milford on the left-hand western side, all the way around to the inner parts of Bristol Bay and Channel on the right-hand side of the map, with various diagrammatic indications of where CO2 would be sourced from. No storage site is mentioned on the website. One might infer, given the location, that a relatively nearby storage site would be like that for HyNet in the Liverpool Bay area, but we shall see. So in terms of, those are the immediate futures, and I do believe that several more of those plus several others which were not featured in my presentation will have the chance of capturing and exporting CO2 to the sites mentioned within the next decade or so. And certainly government and the bays are working extremely hard with partners to make sure that happens. So the futures of CCS in the UK, I think it highly unlikely now, despite the rather checkered past, that we will not see CO2 stored within either North Sea or East Irish Sea depleted oil and gas fields and associated aquifers in the next decade or so. We might clearly some are more advanced than others, and so in the, if you like, the median case, I would anticipate that we'll see over the next 10 to 15 years a handful of sites working really to high capacity areas and receiving CO2 not just by pipeline from shore, but also similar to what Mike mentioned, and that via tanker delivery. I think just now, of late, within this week, the game has changed substantially. The announcement from President Xi in China earlier this week that China will be net zero by 2060, undoubtedly it will be delivered. And that really changes the game for the whole globe. I think it's almost flagfall in terms of a global race now for net zero. And although many would argue that 2060 is far too late, I think we'll change from this rather timid and some trepidation in CCS by many nations to one in which things will start to move very, very quickly. And it's activity like in Norway from the previous presentation, and like is about to happen in the UK, Australia, Canada, the US, and even Brazil now, will drive this forward on a global scale. So having spent a few years in the doldrums between 2015 and 2018 or 2019, I think we're now set for a really significant upswing in the way in which we make the transition low and zero carbon futures, of which CCS will necessarily play a very large part in the early years as we wean ourselves off petroleum products. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, John, for this very interesting presentation. So again, I just want to remind our attendees that if you have any question for John, you can share it now in the chat, and we'll go through all the questions at the end of the session. Thank you very much, John. So our next speaker is Helen Taylor Curran. Hello, Helen.
Hi there.
Hello. So Helen is going to be talking us about the research consortium for carbon capture and storage, Excel. So Helen has been a geochemist at the British Geological Survey for almost 20 years. And currently she's working. She's been part of the Excel development team since 2012. And she's now the UK National Contact Point and member of the management team of Excel. Thank you very much for joining us today, Helen.
No problem. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction, Carla, and to EAGE for inviting me to speak about Excel. I have a plan. First plan is to make my screen change. So the outline really is to provide a little bit of background for Excel for those who aren't familiar with it. I know we've got colleagues from Norway and from Gassnova who probably are well aware of its existence. So a little bit about the context and the background. I'm going to move swiftly on to the principal task, so what Excel actually does.
I think it's the wrong screen, or it's not on full screen.
Apologies. Okay. End it and restart. Is that better? Let me stop. I'll tell you what, I'll stop sharing. I'll share a different screen. That will...
Okay, good. Thanks.
Got to love all these different platforms. Okay.
If you click on swap.
Okay, hold on one second.
Okay.
Right, let's start this process again. And, okay, Carla, do you have the slides to hand?
Yeah, I have the slides.
You
So
yeah,
don't worry. I'm gonna share it now for you. Just a second.
Can't even see.
Yeah, it's fine. We are ready for this.
No, I can't even see anybody's screen or anything. So
okay, can you see now the presentation?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I can't see it at all.
You can't see it.
No, hold
on. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and sharing again. Just a second. Yes. So, I'm sharing again. Can you?
Yes, I can see a tiny screen, so that will be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So.
Just let me know when you want me to change the slide.
Yeah, do you want to use that forward to the just to the outline, Carla? That would be great. Okay, so yes, yeah, so that screen, yes, thank you. So as I say, a little bit of the background of Excel. I'm going to talk about the what Excel actually does in terms of again, just one moment. I'm just trying to get my version of PowerPoint up so I can see where we're at. What we're doing in terms of developing Excel and then moving on to the capacity building program. You could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, what was the purpose behind the initiation of Excel? Well, we've heard that CCS has had a bit of a difficult start in terms of how CCS has been deployed across Europe and across the world, in Europe particularly. The European Commission and the European Strategy for a Forum for Research Infrastructure recognised that there was a need for a dedicated CCS research infrastructure to be developed to enable decarbonisation of the power sector and of industry. It was needed as a key instrument to meet the objectives of the SET plan. It was needed to provide facilities to support framework framework programme projects, industrial initiatives, and also to build skills and capacity in Europe. It needed to be full chain. Initially that was carbon capture, but as we've been hearing, that's now of course progressed towards a utilisation as well as transport and storage. And it needed to cover both the power sector and industrial processes. So who's involved in Excel? Well, the thing to remember about Excel is that it isn't a standard project with a finite life cycle, a lifespan. It's actually a permanent initiative. It's also not made up from the centres that are involved in it. It's actually made up from member states. So it's countries that are members, not research centres or research institutes. So governments need to sign up to these, to Excel as a member. The participating countries are mostly around the North Sea. So the list you can see there, that I can't actually see, but it includes Italy. Each country that's involved has a country node, which is made up of the research infrastructures within that, or research centres within that country, and then each country has a national node or a contact point that coordinates or is the connection point between the research infrastructure in country and the operations centre, which is in Trondheim in Norway. Next slide, please, Carla. So it's had a very long history, but these things are never as simple to build, so there's nothing unusual in that. Back in 2008, we were conceived by ESFRI, the Strategy Forum, and we went on to the Research Infrastructure Roadmap. And 9.5 years later, we are still on the Research Infrastructure Roadmap. Only by this time, we are actually a landmark project. And we have also become a legal entity in our own right. So, as I say, we're not a project anymore. We're actually a legal entity with an indefinite lifespan. Next slide, please, Carla. So what is it that we built? We built the European CCUS research infrastructure, which is basically it's a distributed, integrated network of national facilities. They are the main national nodes are the open circles that you can see on the map. The solid circles are the research providers in each of the countries that feed through those national contact points, the national node, and then up to Trondheim to the Excel Operations Centre. And the infrastructure is there to provide a coordinated access to research infrastructure across Europe. Next slide, please. So what does Excel actually do? Well, Excel's mission is to enable low to zero carbon dioxide emissions from power industry and the power generation and industry. And it has three principal tasks. The first is integration, then to upgrade, and then to construct. So I'm going to talk a little bit about integration and construction side, and I will touch on the upgrade, but I'm not going to focus too heavily on that. Next slide, please, Carla. So you could just go back, please, just go back one. Okay, so the integration element of Excel's activities is around the research centres and the facilities, and it's about drawing those together and then providing this coordinated access to the facilities. It's sort of taking the pressure and the heat and the admin burden out of opening the doors to researchers wanting to come and use the facilities. Next slide, please. So if you want to come and use an Excel facility for research, there's plenty to choose from. We've got 21 providers across the member countries, providing nearly 70 facilities. We've got a pretty good even split between capture and storage facilities across the infrastructure. We have a few transport facilities as well. We don't have any utilisation facilities at this point in time. Those are coming on stream later. So if you wanted to use Excel facilities, you can visit the website. The web address is in the bottom of the screen there. You can see the list of facilities that is available for you to get access to. And if you want to find out, which facility is going to be most appropriate for your particular piece of work, then you can dig in and get a fact sheet for each of those facilities, which tells you about their capability, their capacity, their track record, the instrumentation they have in the facility, what projects they've already been involved in. And if you're worried that you might apply for access and you might be an early adopter and it might not be a smooth process, next slide please, Carla. Then you needn't worry too much, because we have had some experience of this in the past. So back in 2015 to 2017, we had some funding to support transnational access. And we ran 3 calls and we had 20 or more applications to come in and use the labs, and the funding covered travel and subsistence for the travelling researcher and covered the hosting costs for the facility. So it enabled the facility to provide that service. So of the 20 applications, 20 were successful. And as a result, we did have not only transnational access completed, but we were also able to get some papers out as well. So we've got 2 examples here. And I'm not going to apologise for picking 2 that BGS facilities were actually involved in. I don't know if Audrey's online, possibly she is. She would be able to explain a little bit more about the limestone work, and my facility, the soil gas facility, was involved in the mapping work, which is the GHGT presentation. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in applying for access to Excel, we have 2 funded calls coming up. The first is around services and access for industry. So it's specifically focused towards industry and SMEs. They should have been open now. We all know why that won't be. The information should be out for this first call in the coming few weeks, but we're looking to now launch it in spring next year. Because it's industry focused, specifically industry focused, it's probably more likely to be around the capture facilities and capture research projects. And these will be short projects as well. So, you're not going to get 3 years out of an Excel transnational access funded application, but you could potentially use it as seed funding. Or as a scoping study or a pilot study. If that doesn't suit your requirements, then we've got an open call in later on next year, which will be focused around the research priorities, which I'll come on to in a moment. And if neither of those suits your requirements, then of course, if you've got project funds or can self-fund, then you can come and access the facilities anytime. Through the self-funded stream. Next slide, please, Carla. Okay, so just a very quick couple of words about sort of the upgrade element of Excel's activities. It's really around expanding the national nodes, so bringing in new facilities, and expanding the membership of Excel, which is bringing in new countries, but also looking at the facilities and the capability. Next slide, please. So you've seen this before. There's at the bottom of the timeline, you can see that we have we're already benefiting from the national investments in facilities. Many of these are earmarked for being included in Excel as soon as they become available. So already we're starting to expand our facilities. In terms of reach, we're also looking to CO2 utilisation, but we do have some quite strict criteria to meet. And I did just notice in the chat there was a question about this. In that for Excel, for a CO2 utilisation facility to come in, the technology would need to have a sustained positive effect on climate change, and it would also need to tie in closely with CCS work as well. So it should be easily linked to CCS as a technology. I would say if you've got facilities that you want to bring in, or you spotted a facility that you think should be involved in Excel already, if you are already a member of Excel, or your country is already a member of Excel, that's easy. You contact your national contact point. If you are not already a member, then please speak to us anyway, and we can probably start the process of getting the country that you're based in included as a member of Excel. And that's one of the main pieces of work that we're doing over the next couple of years. Next slide, please, Carla. Okay, so finally, a little bit about the construction phase. So where we don't have existing facilities, new facilities, or upgraded or expanded facilities coming on stream, we are looking to construct our own. Next slide, please. So our ambition is high complexity, high value facilities that demand shared investment. So these are facilities that are so big and so complex that a single country, a single member state couldn't construct it on its own. It would need to share resources or obtain incoming resources. So we needed an approach to prioritise and shortlist opportunities about where we might go in the future, with the intention of putting a design study together, and that's kind of where we're getting to at this stage. But a bit about how we've got to where we are. We started by identifying research priorities. Obviously, some of that work is done anyway by ERA in terms of defining research directions, mission innovation, the set plan implementation working group. So, and of course, many of the people involved in Excel are involved in all of those initiatives anyway. So that was arguably one of the easier parts of the work. We then look to map infrastructure and identify map infrastructure against those research priorities and identify the gaps. And actually, I mean, I have to give credit to Kerry, who I think is online at the moment, because she did a lot of that work and was able to come up with a set of prioritised infrastructures. Beyond that, we then had to find some way of narrowing that down to a number of proposals that we could take forward. And that really was quite difficult. So what we did is we based it on the priority level, how urgent the research need was. And then because of the nature of Excel, whether or not we could garner any additional interest in investing that. So this opportunity for co-investment from other countries. So we wanted a multinational interest. And we applied that to storage, and then we applied it to transport, and we've still to bottom out the capture, which is still a work in progress. Next slide, please, Carla. So these are very quickly some of the storage research priorities. Our two highest priorities are around optimization of injection and dynamic storage. So so dynamic storage is about pressure. It's about pressure management, it's about pressure connected volumes, it's about taking care of produced water. So all those kinds of issues, difficult questions to Kerry, please, on these. But what we came up with were two facilities that appeared to be a clear gap. And that was injection testbed and a pressure pilot, both into saline aquifer. Another high priority research need was storage optimization by injection strategies, and the research infrastructure that came out of that was a multi-phase flow facility. So next slide, Carla, please. So just to prove that they weren't all high priorities, we did have some medium and low priority needs and the reasoning behind those. The top one particularly that basically we're looking at caprock integrity and fault controlled migration, and we felt that that was possibly a bit of a lower priority because in the first instance you probably wouldn't be your first choice of storage location anyway. Elsewhere, monitoring technology, the innovation and new technologies were likely to be developed for monitoring independently, and for the low priority, which is around remediation and mitigation, where you're using biology and chemistry to do that. We thought that there may be permitting issues, and actually we could probably build those into another pilot anyway. So what came out of the exercise for storage, next slide please, Carla, are these as our current shortlist to take forward for Excel into a design study. So we've got the injection testbed and the pressure pilot. I should say that these are not intended to be single use for obvious reasons, that they will be multifunctional and will address ideally a range of research needs. But we felt that at minimum, and at the time when this work was done, they would need to at least tick off these two issues as a minimum criteria. We also went through the same exercise for transport, and the outcome of that was a thermophysical properties facility, possibly distributed, and CO2 flow characterisation and fiscal metering facility. Next slide, please, Carla. So that's where we're at with taking facilities forward into design studies and the work that we're currently working on. So we've had another bunch of funding from the European...
sorry, Helen,
yeah.
2 minutes? You have 2 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'll be done in 2 minutes, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say a few words about the capacity building programme. As I say, we've just had a new input of funding from the European Commission on the Horizon 2020 InfraDev 3 funding. So we have a new project called Accelerate. And that is focused very much towards turning the Excel research infrastructure towards industry. And the capacity building programme is very much still in that vein. So what we're looking to do is provide some tailored training towards industry, towards academic researchers that we've not already been involved with and are our normal users. And that will get started in 2021. We have a couple of workshops that we run every year, and we tie those in with Panarea and Sulcis summer schools. So if you're interested in joining those, then keep an eye on the website, and that will be advertised through various channels, usually including UK CCSRC actually as well. But the activities that are coming up soonest are the webinar series. So these are looking at key topics across the CCS chain and how Excel offerings can help to address some of these topics. Next slide, please, Carla. Next slide, please, Carla. Thank you. Okay, so the first of these is on CO2 capture. It is fit for purpose technologies, and it is on, I can't read this, so I think it says the 13th of October, and I think it says 2 o'clock in the afternoon European time. Registration for that is open now. If you are interested, please get in touch with the Operations Centre. I'll have an email for you at the end, or keep an eye on their website. Programme starts in October, it runs through 2023, so I think there should be interest for everybody, but if there is a webinar that you think we should be doing but we haven't got planned, please let us know and we will try and include it in the programme. And finally, next slide please, Carla. Okay, so takeaways. I know it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I do speak very quickly, but the messages I'd like you to take away, please, is that Excel is up and running. It is available for use. Please contact us if you would like to use the facilities. If you want to take advantage of funding, we have upcoming transnational access funding, and we also have upcoming capacity building activities that might be of interest to you. We are, as I say, currently trying to face more towards industry use. So we would very much welcome your input if you would like to help either steer the direction of Excel generally, or of the webinar programs, or of anything else that you've heard. A few acknowledgements regarding funding on the right-hand side, and our contact details down in the bottom right there. And my final slide.
Okay, we have to finish now for starting the discussion.
Is to say thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so
apologies for the technical hitch.
Great. Okay, so I can see, yeah, we have some questions already so any questions you have now, we are gonna start with the discussion section. Before we start this discussion section, please allow me to tell you that we'd like you to fill a survey just for letting us know what is the kind of profile of our audience. So I'm gonna be sharing this link in the chat. And we would really appreciate if you can do this survey for us. And my colleague Benjamin, hello Benjamin, he's gonna now address the questions.
Yes, I'm going to do that. Before, I would like already to thank all the speakers for the effort and excellent presentations. And to the audience, as mentioned by Carla in the beginning, is that we're going to have another event on wind, offshore wind power in 2.5 weeks. So you will get invitations.
I'm going to share the screen so you can see it.
Yeah, that's nice.
Here it goes.
So we have again a limit of 200 participants, and please only register if you really plan to participate, because we were fully booked today, and I'm quite sure not everybody participated. So yeah, we have 200 tickets, and of course we're happy to host a full house. So yeah, you're gonna see here it's gonna focus on offshore wind power efforts and challenges, and we're gonna have 2 talks. The first one is by Equinor on the Hywind Tampen project, done by Gertrud Hausken. And then we're going to have more geological or geotechnical talk by Martin Moneste from NGI on data-driven ground models for offshore wind developments. So please join us on the 21st of October. So basically all of the EIG local chapters are supporting this event again, the OSEC as well. Also for this time, also the local chapter of the Netherlands will join. So you all will get invitations through these local chapters, or follow us on LinkedIn. Okay, but now to probably the even more important point is the discussion now. We have a lot of questions for Mike, so I hope, Mike, you are prepared. And I'm gonna start with a question from Jaap Mont. It's on the sealing quality. So was the sealing quality tested, and in what way or how was this done?
Yeah, hi, thanks.
I'm gonna stop sharing this screen so you can share in case, yeah. Your screen, yeah.
Okay, thanks for all the questions in the chat. I'm going to share my screen. I took, I copy and pasted the questions that looked as if they were for this project in Norway.
That's great.
And there were some related to site characterization, some related to monitoring, and then some other ones. So can you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So one point of clarification before I start trying to answer these questions is that GasNova's role in this study phase has been to help facilitate and coordinate the project. It's actually Equinor as the operator with Total and Shell who've actually been responsible for doing the design work, doing the engineering, doing the subsurface characterization. So they're the real experts. I kind of have a more coordination role. But I will do my best to answer the questions, and then I'm going to share some links and some references to the Northern Lights team, so that if people really want to get into the technical detail, either engineering or subsurface, they can address those questions to the experts. And just, I think that team has done an amazing job. Really, take my hat off to them. So, okay, I spotted 4 questions related to site characterization. How was the sealing quality tested and how? So there was a verification well drilled at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and did a very extensive well program, well logs, coring, extensive coring, extended leak off tests. They did a pumping test to get a dynamic response from the reservoir. So they've tested the seal, which is a regional seal, and they've tested the reservoir as well. There was also a couple of questions on leakage pathways, and I've put a link here to the Northern Lights Environmental Impact Assessment report, which has a good description, and I can just flash up the front cover of that report here, and a diagram within the report which illustrates the leakage pathways that have been examined and risk assessed. So there's a lot to take in there. I suggest that people go and look at the report. But there's a really good description of the leakage risk assessment there. As part of that, natural disasters were taken into account. That was the 3rd question, and then the 4th question: did you take core samples? They took so many core samples. They've cored the cap rock, they've cored the overburden, they've cored the reservoir. So they've got a great set of cores to look at. There were a couple of questions on monitoring. Again, check that environmental impact assessment report for the details, but essentially it's a continuous real-time monitoring of the well, the pressure, the wellhead, downhole pressure. They anticipate doing 4D seismic, similar to Schleipner. They've done forward modeling assessments to see if they think that will work, and they think it will. It won't be as frequently as has been done at Schleipner, but perhaps every 5 years or as required. It will depend on the rate of injection. That kind of answers the 2nd question there as well. And yeah, I can carry on with the other questions, or we can take a break.
Okay, I can quickly give over to John, and then if we have more time, we come back to you. I see that a lot of questions for John have been probably asked in the chat privately, so we could not see what actually was asked. So maybe you could, we saw your answers, but maybe you could give kind of a summary on yeah.
I apologize. So a number of questions. There's one general question about monitoring, asking would we use 4D or time-lapse seismic, and my response to that is that 4D time-lapse seismic data, if you like, the default option, almost goes without saying that is critical. It's been superb in its performance over the Sleipner field. It may be a bit more difficult over deeper fields, which start to receive CO2, but that must only be part of the monitoring suite. And there are a whole host of possibilities, particularly around the wellbores, that can be used for monitoring using some similar tools to those which are deployed in the petroleum sector. There is a summary of that in a book I edited, which I've shown in the link there. And then we've been working on some really delightfully bizarre opportunities to use naturally occurring muons to monitor the change in density of the injection horizon. So our CO2 goes in, So it displaces either petroleum or formation fluid. The formation fluid has a density of about 1.1 tons per cubic meter, and CO2 around about 0.7. And muons are progressively attenuated by density and thickness. So we've developed a method there where we can instrument wells and nearby wellbores to look at either migration of CO2 away from the ejection sites, or alternatively, possibilities of leakage up the wells themselves, if that's an issue. And that instrumentation has got to the commercialization stage. So a whole array of existing and novel techniques are being used to address this. Another question, which I think came in from Lisa, was pointing out that hydrogen generation for hydrogen economy, it doesn't really count as use of CO2, and she's perfectly correct there. And what I think has happened in the UK, at least, is that by changing the acronym, this is so facile, it's unbelievable, but by changing the acronym has allowed a different narrative to emerge. And so the generation of hydrogen for a hydrogen economy will, in the first instance, come from methane. It's unavoidable. There isn't enough surplus low or ultra or zero carbon power, for example, to generate hydrogen from electrolysis of water. And in doing so, you then need to take away the CO2, which comes from the other half of the methane molecule, if you like, once it's partially reacted, and bury it. And that has allowed this different story to emerge, such that this time around, the body language, the activity is quite different than it has been in before. There are a number of things that play into that, including the general trend in public perception, as well as investment criteria, which are promoting renewable and sustainable energies. But I do think this change in narrative has helped the situation in the UK. I'm not sure if there are a couple more questions. There's one from.
For instance, there's just a new question coming in. I'm not sure if anybody wants to comment on it. It's a general question that about the financing of this. So who is going to pay the bill for CCS?
Yeah, I think here we can do a bit of discussion.
Well, I'll initially, if you like. I think the point about any energy system that we use is who pays for the tidy up. On a day-to-day basis, once a week, the dustbin man comes around and collects. Sorry, I'll just delete that. I can't. My daughter tried to call me. I'll catch her some other time. Apologies. Flipping heck. I'm going to mute. Someone else answer.
Mike, any thought on that?
Who's going to pay? Yeah, who's going to pay? The consumers of products that emit CO2 during their life cycle. So what we're seeing is a tendency globally to take the externality cost, which is CO2 emissions, which has been free of charge until now, and people are going to have to start paying for it. So you can avoid paying for it if you go for renewables in the power sector, but if you start trying to do something about hard to abate sectors like steel, cement, waste to energy, or you want to do hydrogen production from steam methane reforming without paying a CO2 penalty price, then CCS becomes the option. And people only pay for things if there isn't a cheaper alternative. So again, it comes back to cost. If you can choose Dogger Bank is now coming in at under £40 per megawatt hour. That's way cheaper than what coal ever could have been with CCS. So nobody's going to pay for CCS in a power generation context on coal because there's a cheaper alternative. But if you get to the point where cement with CCS gets regulated or becomes the best alternative, then perhaps you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the interruption that I got. The problems of working from home, in a sense. What Mike says is perfectly true, but the other reality is that since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, we've had very cheap energy. It may not feel like that to many in energy poverty, but as a proportion of most people's income, the cost of energy today is pretty trivial compared with what it was 2 or 3 generations ago. And what we've not done is accounted for the cost of cleanup in those energy systems. And so we burnt coal, we burnt oil and gas, and not until the last couple of decades recognized that just like using nuclear energy, there is a consequence, and that consequence needs to be factored in. And so, as Mike says, there are some things which are going to be extremely difficult to decarbonize without CCS, including cement production and some other industrial processes. And so, although overall, as technology improves, the price of things goes down, we will need to start paying for that tidy up collectively.
Yes, so then we still have some questions coming in for Helen. Also, if you want to comment on this, I didn't want to exclude you. Please, if you have any opinion or something to share, do that. Otherwise, we have 2 more questions on your talk. So
I think the questions have been handled beautifully by our other speakers, so I'll leave that to them. I can happily take the Excel questions if
yes.
happen. So I'm going to start with arguably the easy one first, which is from around renewed interest in Excel, given the renewed interest as a result of the renewed interest in CCS and movement in the right direction in CCS. That's relatively easy. We always did have a larger potential membership list than the 5 that we initiated with. Some entirely expected players, Switzerland and Germany, Poland, Greece, we're all involved in Excel at various points, and we are still in a dialogue with those guys to try and get them over the line, really, in terms of getting ministries to sign up. Poland's been very close and then moved backwards on at least 3 occasions in the last few years. So certainly we are looking to expand our membership, and we are hopeful that Switzerland and Poland may come in. And Germany, even with its restrictions on onshore, is also quite interested in coming back in. So that's looking quite good. In terms of interest in using the facilities, footfall's always been a little bit of a problem, and it's very closely linked to the ability for Excel to support access. So where we haven't had transnational access funding, then footfall has tended to fall back a little bit. But that's something that we're actively addressing. I think some of our communication strategy will help to address that. So I hope that answers that question. And then the tricky question is from Paula around the challenges of the design study. We're under no illusion at all that that is going to be an easy piece of work, but we're very lucky that we have very close connections with a large number of organisations and a lot of experience that are doing exactly this kind of work. Previous question from Kerry. I rely on Kerry an awful lot because she's developing the geoenergy testbed in Sutton Bonington, and we are learning from that experience. We're also learning from the UK GEOS experience in the UK, and we're also aware of other construction initiatives, particularly in Norway, that we can also draw on their experience. I think in the first instance, the biggest hurdle we have to get over is agreeing which design study we're going to take forward of all the possibilities. And of course, that then becomes an issue around vested interests from various member states, and it becomes as much political as it is scientific.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So I would like to remind you again, to our attendees, if you can complete the survey we've been sharing. I'm going to share it again here in the chat.
It just takes 5 seconds to fill it out. It's easy. So we would really much appreciate that.
So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I don't know if we have more questions, Benjamin.
Yeah, I guess the questions will never end, but we have a time slot to keep, and it's Friday. So, so I think the best is, I'm quite sure that all of the speakers are more than happy to, you can contact them by email. I'm sure they're all happy to answer and discuss. And yeah, as CCS will not end this year, we will have plenty of occasions to discuss in future, I guess. So I think we will stop the Q&A by now and for now.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you very much for to all the speakers for joining us as well today and giving such interesting presentations. If for all the attendees, if you are interested in joining other activities, I've been sharing as well in the chat the link for our LinkedIn group. So some of them you've been asking where to find information for the next webinar. All the information will be published in the LinkedIn group. And yeah, we hope to see you all there.
Thanks to everybody and see you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for all the great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.